You're listening to People, Places, Planet, the official podcast of the Environmental Law Institute, a nonpartisan, nonprofit research and education institute making law work for people, places, and the planet. If you enjoy the podcast and want to support our work, consider donating at eli.org/donate.
Hi, listeners. Thanks for joining me for another episode of People, Places, Planet. I'm your host, Dara Albrecht, and welcome to our episode about Food Waste Prevention Week in Nashville. This episode is going to be a little different. I'm going to introduce the food waste problem and set some context for you about the city of Nashville. And then we'll hand over the reins to Linda Breggin, a senior attorney at ELI and professor at Vanderbilt Law School, as we highlight some changemakers in the food waste scene in Nashville. Roughly 31% of food in the United States, valued at $382 billion, or 1.4% of our entire U.S. GDP, goes uneaten. Most of it is sent to landfills and incinerators, which results in a range of negative environmental, social, and cost impacts. As a result, uneaten food accounts for 4% of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, 16% of U.S. freshwater use, 16% of U.S. cropland use, and 24% of landfill inputs. This year, ELI's Center for State and Local Governance is sponsoring Food Waste Prevention Week, a nationwide and global movement uniting stakeholders across food, business, government, and environmental sectors to reduce food waste, tackle food insecurity, save money, and promote a healthier environment. Last year, 750 partners participated across 49 states and 22 countries. As entities with key roles in managing municipal solid waste, addressing food insecurity, and mitigating climate change, cities are on the forefront of these efforts to reduce food waste. This podcast will highlight the exciting initiatives in several sectors in the city of Nashville, where the city council adopted a goal of reducing food waste by 50% by 2030. So now I'll turn it over to Linda, a senior attorney at ELI and director of ELI's Center for State and Local Governance, to highlight some of these Nashville changemakers. Thanks for jumping on the podcast today, Linda.
Well, thanks, Dara, and happy Food Waste Prevention Week, everyone. I'm really excited for today's discussion. The guests are some of my personal heroes for the work that they're doing in Nashville, where I'm based. So I'm really looking forward to discussing their contributions to reducing food waste, but also highlighting their efforts in the hopes that their work can be replicated in other cities around the country. To just do a little background, Dara, on ELI's work on food waste in Nashville before we talk to our first guest, because we have been working on food waste since way back in 2015 when Environmental Law Institute served as the project director for a Natural Resources Defense Council pilot project called the Nashville Food Waste Initiative. The initiative was part of NRDC's pioneering work on food waste reduction. And not only was NRDC instrumental in elevating the problem of food waste in our country, but they also realized early on that local governments and their communities have key roles to play in addressing food waste. When you think about it, cities are on the front lines, right? They're responsible for efficiently managing often growing volumes of municipal solid waste. They're responsible for reducing food security in their communities, and they have increasingly embraced their role in addressing climate change. So reducing food waste helps cities achieve all of these goals. ELI and NRDC now serve as senior advisors to the National Food Waste Initiative, which is truly one of the most interesting and fun projects I've worked on over the last several decades. Food waste is a problem everyone can relate to, and it's just been uplifting to watch awareness grow in my own city of Nashville and watch leaders such as the guest on today's podcast just step up to meet the challenge and become a model for cities around the country. So today we want to share with you their work, but before we do, and because food waste is an issue that has been central to my work, I just want to thank NRDC and particularly the brilliant Darby Hoover for giving us, ELI, the opportunity to work on the Nashville pilot project and for continuing to be a wonderful food waste mentor, collaborator, and true leader on food waste reduction. And I also want to say that none of our work in Nashville would be possible without the generous support of a Nashville-based family foundation. Their quiet support has been instrumental to local and national efforts to reduce food waste. And that is a nice segue to our first guest, who is a key partner of ELI and now the leader of the Nashville Food Waste Initiative. We are delighted to have Todd here today. Todd Lawrence is the executive director of the Urban Green Lab. And he has built UGL, as we affectionately call it, into an organization that is just really making a difference in realizing its mission to teach Nashvillians how to live sustainably. Before leading Urban Green Lab, Todd spent 15 years working on the front lines of global health, working in Nashville, Washington, D.C., as well as in South Sudan, and as a Peace Corps volunteer in Zambia. He does so much in our community, from teaching as an adjunct instructor at Vanderbilt University's Peabody College of Education to serving on a range of mayoral committees and task forces. Todd and I work together a lot, and so it's really fun to be able to highlight the work that you're doing, Todd. Welcome.
Thank you, Linda. It's good to be here.
So, Todd, could you start by telling us about Urban Green Lab and how food waste fits into your work?
Sure. Well, Urban Green Lab is a nonprofit organization based here in Nashville. We've been around since 2009, and our whole purpose is to teach communities how to live sustainably. So we want to make sure that everybody here in Nashville understands basic sustainable practices like saving water or conserving energy or reducing waste, and take action because of that. Food waste is a big part of that because obviously we care about reducing waste, and reducing food waste is a huge part of making sure that we are living more sustainably and the planet is healthy. So food waste was always a natural fit with our curriculum and our strategy. And we also just loved that food waste is what you see in your house every day. You can feel it, you can touch it, you can see the results of reducing wasted food versus other things like greenhouse gas emissions.
Thanks, Todd, for giving us that context. And, we're particularly interested in talking with you today about the work that you do with teachers, or as you say, in classrooms. It's really groundbreaking work. And central to your mission is training teachers to bring what you call a sustainability lens into the classroom. Can you tell us about how UGL has worked with teachers on food waste specifically? Have you developed special lesson plans or materials on food waste, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question, Linda. So early on, Urban Green Lab realized that students were the future and they were going to inherit the city no matter how we left it. But there's no way we could go and teach all the students ourselves. There are 86,000 public school students and many more private school students and so forth. So we realized that teachers were really the key and that students would pay best attention to their own instructors. So we focused on informing and activating teachers in this classroom so that they could teach their students about sustainable practices of all kinds. And of course, eventually that meant food waste for us. So we define a classroom as really any setting where there's an educator. And that can be a public school, it could be a private school, but it could also be a homeschool teacher. It could be a librarian. It could be a nonprofit educator. It's really wherever we find people who are trying to share knowledge with the next generation. Camp counselors are in there as well. That to us is a classroom, and that's why we focused on teachers as a core strategy for getting education out there. And food waste early on became a part of our teacher training curriculum. As you mentioned, the National Food Waste Initiative, which was really kickstarted here on the ground by ELI and NRDC, came to Urban Green Lab back in about 2019. And we have been trying to make sure that training teachers how to teach about food waste reduction is a part of the Nashville Food Waste Initiative overall. And what we've done is we've made food waste a pillar of our curriculum that we've created for teacher training. We created what we call the Sustainable Classrooms curriculum in partnership with Metro Nashville Public Schools, but also Vanderbilt's Peabody College of Education and peer teachers who we really respect and love here in the city. So that curriculum gets into the basics of what food waste is, how it's wasted, where the opportunities are for young people or adults to reduce food in their work or in their homes. And it really is just a primer for this generation on why food waste counts when it comes to protecting the environment and protecting our society. We provide two different kinds of teacher trainings. One is a hub training where we bring teachers from all over the city to Urban Green Lab's office to teach them about food waste reduction. But we also provide cohort trainings where we go to a school and we train a cluster of teachers so that they can create sort of a learning community in that school when it comes to food waste learning. The last thing I'll mention is that we also have something called home investigations. These are sort of like packets that students take home with them to learn how they can reduce food waste in their house. And so they measure different types of foods that are wasted and how often those foods are wasted. They count the pounds that are or could be wasted in the house. And it just illustrates for youth in their own context why this is important and how it can be done. And to date, we've trained about 350 educators, again, in all those different settings, reaching tens of thousands of future Nashvillians.
Thanks for walking us through that. And I just love the approach, particularly the very expansive definition of classrooms. And I should say, I still remember when I first met you and listened to you talk about your approach. I was delighted because I knew we had found a wonderful home for a pilot to become a permanent project, the Nashville Food Waste Initiative, under your stewardship and leadership. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how teachers in particular respond when you work with them. Are they excited to teach their students about food waste? And I'm also curious if you have any sense or any way of measuring how students have responded to learning about food waste, and in particular, the very hands-on project that you were describing.
Early on, I was worried that we wouldn't get a lot of takers when it came to training teachers about food waste and sustainable practices in Nashville, just because we don't have a strong tradition of teaching about sustainability here in the city yet. And again, that's why Urban Green Lab exists. But we've been pleased over the years to find so many teachers interested in sustainability and actually asking us to come and do these trainings. And just about every teacher we've talked to has welcomed us to teach about and train about food waste. So it's actually been a surprisingly welcoming atmosphere for teaching about food waste. And when I talk to other nonprofit or organization leaders in other cities, it's the same atmosphere of excitement. I think teachers find food waste reduction really exciting and a great hands-on way of learning about how to protect the planet and save the climate. So I think it really has been a source of excitement for teachers and for students. Students love this. In our 2024 annual report for Urban Green Lab, we describe how teachers, as a result of our teacher trainings, plan to integrate food waste reduction into their classrooms, no matter what the grade is or what the level is or what the setting is. And in fact, 94% of teachers plan to integrate food waste reduction in their curricula, which is terrific. And what we've tried to do is tie food waste learning to state academic standards, because right now there's no standard in the state of Tennessee for teaching about food waste. And in fact, there's no academic standard in the state of Tennessee for teaching about sustainability. So we had to meticulously tie our lessons around food waste or water conservation or saving energy to existing state standards around biodiversity or ecosystems or earth systems. And that wasn't easy, but the curriculum helps teachers teach to it. Otherwise, they can't use it. So without tying these lessons to standards, teachers can be as excited as they want to be, but they can't teach to it. And so that's why you have to have input from teachers to design that curriculum in the first place, because that's how we learn to do this. But it's got to be tied to what they have to teach. Even in a private setting, it needs to be tied to what they have to teach. So that gets teachers even more excited when they know that they've got that support, that alignment with the curriculum, and they're free to teach to it and test to it. And students really take these lessons and run with it. They create composting programs in their schools. They start encouraging cafeteria staff to reduce wasted food. They create gardens at their schools. These are all seeds that this type of learning is planting, and it's helping young people at a very early age, as upstream as possible, think about the lessons of food waste and sustainability in a way that captures their imagination and helps them feel like heroes.
Speaking of capturing imagination, I was fortunate enough several years ago to watch you all in action when you worked with an elementary school here in Nashville to conduct a waste audit. I was wondering if you could tell us about that experience and whether you think it helps students and teachers understand the food waste problem and actually take lasting steps to reduce it. I found it really inspirational, and I want you to talk a little bit about it in the hopes that parents and students and teachers listening to this podcast will be motivated to try to do a waste audit at their schools.
Yeah, Linda, that was a really fun time. And I remember this image of you elbow deep in food scraps, helping students understand where to put their food scraps. It was really an awesome moment for Urban Green Lab and Environmental Law Institute. And so kudos to you and our partnership there. And that was a bigger partnership with the World Wildlife Fund, who had created a curriculum called the Food Waste Warriors Curriculum. And I should say the other partner here was the Kroger Foundation, who had helped to support that effort at the World Wildlife Fund. And, there are 100,000 schools in the United States, reaching about 30 million students every day. And what the World Wildlife Fund wanted to do was pick a handful of cities and their schools and try to get food waste audits going and see if it would lead to reduced food waste. And so Nashville was one of 9 cities in 8 states chosen by the World Wildlife Fund for that project. They found overall, among all the schools, that food waste in schools every year accounts for about $1.7 billion. So you can imagine what toll that takes on a city's budget, a school system's budget, a district's budget. But just all of that lost food, water, material, and packaging, it's all wasted. There's a huge financial toll. And on average, they found that every student wasted about 40 pounds of food every year. But the good news is that through these 200 plus audits back in 2019, they found that there was about a 53% reduction in food waste in those cafeterias from their very first audit to their last audit. So that's a big change just in a few months' time. And it shows the power of how quickly schools and kids adapt to that behavior. In just 3 months, they cut their food waste habits in half. And Nashville was no exception. We had 3 schools in the program. We did 17 audits. And on average, we proved that every school every year wastes about 88,000 pounds of food in Nashville. That's about 62 pounds per student per year, so a little higher than the average across the country. And that we waste about 27,000 cartons of milk in Nashville every year. So there's just this huge opportunity to make schools a lab of learning, especially the cafeteria, about food waste and sustainability overall. And we had one student come up and tell us, I'm never wasting food ever again. That's the kind of thing we need to hear from every student. And they won't hear it unless they're exposed to those issues, unless they're putting food scraps in the right place. And they're walking out of the cafeteria saying, I learned something today.
Thanks for telling us about that. And, it just highlights that there are a lot of reasons to reduce food waste, including those numbers on cost. Those are incredible. And it's just so powerful, the reaction that students have. I would be remiss if I did not say that we are currently working with World Wildlife Fund on a model state law for reducing food waste in K through 12 schools. They are just doing some incredible work on food waste reduction. I think what you were describing also tells us that you manage what you measure. In fact, we looked at some of the literature on that adage, and it turns out it really is true. Once you see that waste, once you measure it, it really incentivizes people to want to manage and reduce it. So I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us today, Todd. We will put in the podcast notes a link to your website with information about food waste reduction, as well as a link to the video of the waste audit, because it really is a lot of fun to see Urban Green Lab in action.
Linda, I really thank you for your partnership. Urban Green Lab has worked so closely with the Environmental Law Institute over these years. And that's important because in order to affect change, we need change from the top down and the bottom up. We need policy change, but we also need to mobilize communities and educate them. So when those two come together, which they are here in Nashville, I think we can make a difference.
Todd, thanks for telling us more about your work with Urban Green Lab. Let's move on to the next segment, how universities can lead the way.
Thank you, Dara. And I am really pleased to introduce a person who is making a real difference when it comes to reducing food waste in Nashville. David Kuile is an Associate Vice Chancellor for Auxiliary Services in the Division of Administration at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, where he oversees 10 departments, including campus dining, catering, and events and concessions. Prior to coming to Vanderbilt over 7 years ago, David was with Aramark in several roles, including as a district manager and general manager. David has an executive MBA from Vanderbilt Owen Graduate School of Management and a BA from University of North Texas. David, thanks so much for talking with us today.
Thanks, Linda. Appreciate you having me on.
Well, Vanderbilt has made major efforts to reduce food waste, and I have personally watched that change happen because I also have a Vanderbilt affiliation as a lecturer in law at the law school. And really, David, it all started when you joined Vanderbilt. So, can you give us an overview of the biggest initiatives that address food waste, how they've evolved over time, and how this might fit into Vanderbilt's broader sustainability strategy?
Sure. I appreciate that, Linda. And I will say, a big part of that too is the partnership that we've had since I started in 2017. And I really valued that and just how you have helped open doors in different ways with our LinkPass software and partnerships. So in 2017, through introductions, we met the compost company here in Nashville, and we started a partnership focusing on pre and post-consumer food waste. And this was a big deal because at Vanderbilt University, we serve over 2 million meals a year. So we have a fair amount of food waste, which we are constantly working to reduce. Through this partnership, we started in one location that was at the Commons. We successfully launched that in 2017. And once we got that up and going and off the ground in 2018, we then expanded across the rest of our locations, which include an additional 15 different locations. In 2018, we adopted LeanPath software system to measure, analyze, and reduce food waste. And that also helped to provide detailed insights into waste patterns in our dining operations. In 2019, we expanded our efforts in reducing single-use plastics by getting rid of bottled water and sodas. I realize that's not food waste, but it's really that focus on sustainability that is a core value here at Vanderbilt. One interesting thing that we did in 2019 is we introduced blended burgers, which is 70% beef, 30% mushrooms, and that reduced red meat consumption. That was actually in partnership with students here. So 2020, as we all face those challenges in COVID, we found opportunities to partner with local programs across Nashville and really do food donations. And I think that was an opportunity not for us just to reduce waste, but especially to support those local nonprofits during that really challenging time in society. We really accelerated through 2021. And then in 2022, we were really excited to achieve our zero waste certification for all of our campus dining locations. And it was a big achievement that the team is really excited about as a result of all their hard work. In 2024, we shifted from LeanPath to a new platform called Streamline, which is powered by a Topanga IO system. We did that in the fall of 2024. It's an AI-powered food waste tracking system, and it's integrated with our menu management system, which is Fusion. And really, that's another tool that the team utilizes in terms of forecasting food to help manage that food waste. And Linda, you asked really how our efforts tie into the broader Vanderbilt sustainability strategy. And, there's a number of different ways Vanderbilt has committed to power its campus entirely through renewable energy and achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. And a big part of that is the zero waste goal that was set for 2030 by reducing waste generation and enhancing resource recovery. And with the dining locations being certified as zero waste, we were early in that achievement of that goal through our department. And then also we contribute to the university's environmental stewardship and sustainability objectives. And then Streamline, the system that we utilize, strengthens our commitment to AI in terms of utilizing data collection to make enhanced and improved decisions to waste reduction.
Well, David, I think listeners will understand why I'm such a fan of the work you're doing at Vanderbilt. It is really impressive. And what an incredible amount of food that Vanderbilt serves. 2 million meals a year. I'm curious, what are some of the biggest challenges of managing food waste at that scale?
Yeah, that's a great question, Linda. And really we look at it that there's 3 parts of managing food waste. So one is pre-production. Then the second is with the students and at that point of service. And then afterwards is the post-consumer, as we say. In terms of the first part of the process is accurate forecasting. And so that's where it starts, is really predicting the meal demand. And that allows us to minimize overproduction while we meet the diverse dietary preferences of our students here at Vanderbilt University. And so as we produce the data, that is the number of students that are coming in, the size of the servings that we're providing, and then where they're going to be eating. Now, as I mentioned, that second part is the interaction with the students, and that's really in that portion control side. And so that is a lot of education with the students from a nutrition standpoint. We always want to make sure that we are providing food to meet our students' dietary needs, but then also we do want to help them with a culinary experience. And so there's a fine balance there that we just continue to work with the students so that we can serve them what they need and also help to realize what they want. And then finally, the post-consumer piece, that is done through education. And in addition to collecting the food waste with scales after the student drops off their trays, we then projected that information onto screens. And so then that helped to show the students how much waste we were trending for that particular day, how that compared to the day prior week, and so forth. And that really helped create awareness. Where we found a real opportunity to make an impact is more on that one-to-one, person-to-person scale. And we've done that through events such as what we call Weigh the Waste, which is we have students who are volunteers for campus dining go into our dining operations and literally work with the students when they're dining to scrape the plate onto scales, weigh the food, and help educate students in terms of opportunities that they have to help reduce that food waste.
That is so interesting, David. I'm really curious if you're seeing any trends in terms of food waste. Are certain foods being wasted more than others? And does that change from year to year? Because I can only imagine that predicting how much food to procure has got to be a challenge.
It is. Yeah, that is one of the challenges. Like if we have an item that has been on our menu for a while, it's pretty easy to predict. And so we're able to really drive that food waste down. As I mentioned before, we partner with students to enhance that culinary experience as well. So we try a lot of different recipes and producing new items that we don't have the data on. That's really where the challenge comes. And where we have really helped to drive those numbers down and help keep the waste down as much as possible is going on a made to order basis. And so we prep the food and hold it at a cold state and then either bring it together as a composed salad or heat it up at the station. And that allows us to keep those ingredients. And if we don't utilize them in production, then we can use it for a different service.
Well, thanks for sharing all of that information. I'm curious, just from a bigger picture perspective, what role generally would you say the students, faculty, and campus culture play in shaping Vanderbilt's approach to managing food waste and dining? You've already given some examples of student engagement, but just generally in terms of the big picture campus culture.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, here at Vanderbilt, it's a real focus on sustainability and long-term goal, right? And so that really becomes part of our culture. And that allows campus dining to lean into that space. And one thing that may sound not that big a deal, but being trayless is a way that we can make an impact. And you may say, well, what does that mean? Well, if you don't have a tray where you can pile on a bunch of different plates or bowls, right? You can only carry what's in your hand. That helps minimize the number of containers that you're putting food into and then taking to your table. In addition to that, we partner with the Students Promoting Environmental Awareness and Responsibility. So that's SPEAR, as well as Vanderbilt Student Government. And we worked with them to source the correct size of plates and bowls. So interestingly enough, those students helped us reduce the size of those, which then helps to reduce the size of the portions. And by having the students drive those initiatives, right? It's not campus dining is doing this, but again, it's this partnership, this engagement with the students to help further and support Vanderbilt's mission as a whole. And so that's been very exciting. And then one other piece on the faculty engagement is really this integration of sustainability topics into the curriculum and research projects. One great partner of ours is Dr. Lori Troxel. We worked with her on a number of different sustainability initiatives and gotten into the classroom and really partnered with some student groups to move things forward, such as the campus garden.
Well, that's great, David. And, I do think food waste is one of those issues that really resonates with people across the board because we all throw away food and most people feel kind of bad about that. So I'm glad to hear that you're getting that student and faculty engagement. I heard you mention earlier that you have worked with and collaborated with some local organizations. I think that's wonderful because a lot of times universities don't engage with the local community very much. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and who's picking up your compost, for example, and where are you donating food?
Yeah, and you're right. It's something that we found very meaningful. What we've actually done is we've partnered with local nonprofits so that each of our dining halls has a different partner. And some of those partners are Roof in the Inn, the Nashville Rescue Mission, Operation Stand Down, Second Harvest Food Bank. And so each one of those communicates directly with their assigned dining hall. That way, it's that personal relationship to where our managers are engaged with those nonprofits, and the nonprofits then can also provide feedback in terms of the positive impact that our team members are making to their specific mission. The compost company has been a huge partner for us. As I mentioned, we started that back in 2017. And as we continue to grow as a department, they continue to scale with us. And it's been exciting because initially it was just us sending waste to them, but we're now getting compost back from them and utilizing that in the campus dining garden and also across facilities, which is exciting to think that this waste is actually coming back to us here at Vanderbilt, going into the soil for some production for the environment.
It's not waste that's coming back, right? It's a resource. That's what's
That's
so
right.
beautiful about it.
Right. Yeah.
And I want to note that I think it is so smart to have the individual dining facilities develop relationships with nonprofits in Nashville that are addressing food insecurity, because one of the biggest challenges with surplus food donation is just getting it routinized and systematized. So it's not always a one-off situation where you're trying to deal with the logistics each time. So that's
Yeah.
really encouraging. Are there cost savings implications of using the software programs that you're using and planning ahead as you are?
We track our food waste and we track our cost per meal. So if we're serving 2 million meals and we say the nickel per meal that we serve, people are like, oh, it's a nickel. Well, that's $100,000. We absolutely track it down to the penny because of the impact that it makes with the volume that we serve. And we've been able to keep our food cost per meal down in an inflationary environment, which it's not by cutting the quality. It's by running more efficiently. It's by having access to good data and being able to make meaningful decisions utilizing that data. And so that really allows us to keep the quality of the program while not driving those costs up through those challenging environments.
And David, I think being able to make the cost case too can really influence other universities to
Yep.
take a serious look at finding good measurement tools. So thank you
Yep.
for sharing that. Well,
Yep.
this has been so interesting. And I want to close with one more question. And that is, I'm curious whether there was one moment or experience that really changed the way that you think about food waste and motivated you to take all of these incredible actions that you are taking to reduce food waste.
Yeah, Linda, we were driven really based on the university's overall strategic goals. But I'll tell you an experience that you helped us have here at Vanderbilt University that really changed the way we thought about food waste. And that was the James Beard Waste Not Food Waste cooking demonstration. And so that's when we had teams of local chefs who got market baskets made up of quote unquote food waste and produced just exquisite dishes that were then judged by panels. And I'll tell you, some of the food that came out of that, you would have never guessed that it was considered waste that they were using because it was just scraps or things that typically get thrown into the garbage, but made these dishes that you could serve at any five-star restaurant. And really, I think that helped us all realize, oh, so we do need to rethink literally every scrap of food that we look at and we think is waste. And how could we repurpose that and use it in a dish that can be served and appreciated by the students here at Vanderbilt?
Well, David, you're very kind to say that, but I should be thanking you for twice hosting events with James Beard Foundation. These were events for the community and the university to educate people about food waste, and I'm incredibly impressed with what they were able to produce. And we'll put in the podcast notes the link to the YouTube video of both of these events. We also had a demonstration project by a James Beard nominated chef here in Nashville. But the thing that I remember from the waste not cooking demonstration was one of your chefs made a cocktail, and the ice in the cocktail was made from frozen pineapple cores. Everyone throws those away. So I just thought that was so cool. And I heard people talking about it afterward. Thanks for mentioning that event, though. And thank you for joining us. I look forward to continuing to work with you and see all the wonderful things that you're doing on the Vanderbilt campus. And we are excited to be able to share those through this podcast with other universities.
Yeah, Linda, thanks for having me, and just thanks for being such a great partner since I got here on day one at Vanderbilt in supporting our overall mission and sustainability goals at the university. So thank you.
And let's shift gears to our next guest, Tyler Lee, who is the executive chef at the One Hotel in Nashville. We're excited to hear about this next segment, Innovation in Hospitality.
Well, thanks, Dara. And I just want to add a little to Tyler's resume here before we jump in. He has been in the culinary profession for many years. And prior to joining One Hotel, he was a sous chef at several of Nashville's most popular restaurants, Gray and Dudley at 21C, STK, Ella's on Second. So we're really excited, Tyler, to have you here today. And I have been to your lovely hotel in Nashville, where I am based, several times, including for an event with our partner, Urban Green Lab, that you all were so kind to provide free of charge for community groups to discuss food waste and other sustainability issues. I really have been fortunate to taste some delicious food at One Hotel, and I know that sustainability is central to your culinary philosophy. And I'm hoping you can tell us about how that shapes your decisions as an executive chef, really all the way from sourcing to plating.
Well, first, thanks for having me on. It's always great to talk about sustainability at its core, especially related to the culinary field and how it transpires through the rest of hospitality. At One Hotel, the biggest ethos that we have is doing all the good we can. And that leans itself not only from how we source, but to the overall experience that our guests has when they're here in our building. We have a large biophilic atmosphere for our guests, so it feels like you're outside enjoying the nature. And we really bring that in when it comes to the food and how we plate. So when we go to look at building a menu and sourcing certain ingredients, we always look at the season. We've been very honored to have met some very great farm partners. One being Green Door Gourmet, who's 9 miles from our building, door to door. And it's been a fantastic partnership. So we look at certain farms and we ask the farmers themselves, what are you guys planning on growing for spring, for summer, for autumn? And we really try to build around from that aspect. It's taken many years of trial and error to get to that point. So when we source these ingredients, whether it be tomatoes or peppers or potatoes, we have to look at the overall, how are they getting to us? Is it something that is coming from a domestic farm in Idaho from potatoes, or am I getting it 9 miles from our door? And what kind of greenhouse gases or emissions or plastic usage, or is it shipping cardboard? There's so many little details that I think a lot of the community and guests don't really realize. So the behind the scenes aspect to this really is forefront of what are we going to be able to divert. So if we're bringing in a case of potatoes and it's covered in plastic bags, we may not be able to divert a plastic bag. However, our farmer who's bringing them in a reusable tote, we can immediately give that back to them. We know that they've been sustainably grown. But even plating, when we really dive deep, you don't want to add a bunch of what old chefs have called the foo-foo, the sprinkle of parsleys, the unintentional non-edible garnishes. So every touch that we do to a plate has a very large intention to the overall composition of the food.
Thanks, Tyler. It's really interesting to hear about the supply chain and also plating. I'm curious what this looks like behind the scenes in your kitchen, just for listeners to have a more concrete sense. What are some examples of measures you adopted, maybe finding a place for a compost bin or whatever else in order to foster food waste reduction?
So the behind the scenes in our kitchen, on our loading docks, we have multiple waste diversions, whether it be large compost bins, glass recycling, cardboard recycling. That's all front and center when our vendors come into our building. Once our ingredients make their way down to the kitchen, every station within our kitchen has multiple smaller compost bins for any other scraps that we don't have another usage for. We really like to build stocks from scratch or try to find a use for the rest of the ingredient, whether it be carrot tops for chimichurri or vegetable peelings for a stock. If we don't have to compost and we can use it another way, that's what we're going to do. But the other aspect to that would be the compost bins. Every day on the hour, we have several of our steward team or dishwashers go through all of our stations, collect this, which goes to a larger compost center. And then that gets taken to our main hub. Along with that, everything that gets into our kitchen is immediately broken down and diverted by our team, whether that's going to be plastic for certain recycling aspects, the cardboard, and then other items that may not be waste diverted. And then those go to our loading dock again for receiving. And we actually use a scale and work alongside Food Prank Group to track all of our waste diversion for our entire building. And that allows us to keep track of how much landfill is going, how much recycling, how much cardboard, how much compost and glass. And having that data historically has allowed us to further emphasize our sustainability and have a better story to tell our guests.
That's really interesting, Tyler. A long time ago, we actually did a little research at Environmental Law Institute into the old adage that you manage what you measure. And it sounds like that is, in fact, the case. Also interesting that you've really routinized or systematized these measures, even including in job descriptions, which of course makes a lot of sense and makes sure that it is actually implemented. I'm wondering if there's some creative or unexpected ways that you minimize food waste in your kitchen. And have any of these been particularly transformative?
I would say the most transformative way that we've been able to minimize food waste is adopting a zero waste initiative when it comes to building our menus and adding items, whether beverage or food. One that's been most transformative for this is going to be our cocktail initiative, along with our wellness and broth. And that's been a lot of trial and error and workshopping with our beverage director. So espresso martinis are very much trendy or timeless, as one might say. And we actually use old coffee grounds that come from our espresso machines in our cafe or in our normal kitchen. And we'll turn those into an espresso syrup to use in our cocktails, making sure that we have a second life to the product itself. When it comes to the food, we've really dove deep into wellness and the stocks and broths that provides a lot of nutrients. Tomatoes are a very big ingredient that is grown throughout most of spring and late summer. Now, Nashville has a very large limestone base, and a lot of the aquifers are filtered through limestone. When it goes into the tomatoes that are being grown, the acidity and the minerality is actually accented. So we use tomatoes that are on the last leg of their life or vegetable peelings and whatnot, and we make a fortified stock out of this. We've seen such a growth in that sector of our menu that we really didn't know that a lot of our guests were really looking for. Our clientele at Hotel Nashville is very into what they're putting into their body and being knowledgeable about it. So we've taken it a lot on ourselves to learn all the different aspects of this and be able to meet them kind of in the middle for what they're seeking and what we're able to bring due to our sustainability and minimizing our food waste as a ethos.
I mean, those are really creative ideas. I was excited to see that broth was on the menu now. So, I mean, this is just creative. The espresso martini, the broths, it almost seems like taking sustainability into account has enhanced your culinary creativity rather than limiting it. Is that fair to say?
I think it'd be fair to say, I think sustainability is definitely on the up and up when it comes to different chefs and kind of how their cuisine is molded. A lot of people understand what a Michelin star may mean for restaurants, but I don't think a lot know about Michelin green stars. And green stars are very rooted in the sustainability practices of a restaurant. You can tell that certain measures are being made when it comes to the creativity that chefs are coming up. When we are looking through and really having a vision for 2025, and we saw this wellness vision, we really wanted to find out what we can push the envelope with. And it's not as easy as people come to Nashville, they want hot chicken, they want biscuit and gravy, they want all these hearty Southern things. Tourism is such a large part of the city, and you want to be able to take care of those guests, but also make them feel well at the end of the day. You don't want them crashing, in the middle of Broadway on a Wednesday afternoon. You want them to be able to experience the rest of the city, and being able to come up with either biscuits and gravy with a nice house-made chicken sausage, making it lighter and trying to make them gluten-free, I think is one of the ways that we've really pushed the boundary of what food could be or what it can be, and allow our guests to not only experience the hotel when they're here, but really experience the city when they come to visit.
Thanks, Tyler. And I actually did not know that we were not a Michelin city. And I really hope that's going to change sometime in the near future, because the amount of culinary talent that has come into the city in even just the last 5 years is phenomenal. You mentioned some of your local purveyors. Can you tell us a little bit about the opportunities, but also the challenges that come with sourcing locally and sustainably?
Yeah, I think that ties back into our tourism aspect for Nashville, with it being such a large part of business overall in the city. Every day, we usually run through a seasonal list as chefs, and we look ahead because we never want to be caught last second when it comes to the season. The weather here changes so frequently, and I think a lot of that comes back to just how we work with our farm partners overall. We've been lucky to go out to their farms, walk the fields with them, and talk with the rest of the workers and the farmers, and really understand what it means for their everyday life and what they really push into their product that they're ready to bring to the market. We've been lucky to partner with Nashville Grown for a few years now, being able to source from a lot of these smaller farms. Biggest challenge is just the amount of product. With us being a hotel, we run through so much food with just the amount of clients that we get in this building. If a farm only has 5 pounds of specialized fingerling potatoes, that may be all that we're able to get. And we try to find the best way we can utilize that. So when we're able to build our menus and see that we really want to put fingerling potatoes on the menu, we know 6 or 7 different farms that are probably going to have it. We just kind of cycle through those farms and allow us the best way to get that product that's being grown 15 minutes, 20 minutes from the building onto the plates in front of these guests, and be able to tell them what you're eating came from down the street. These are Tennessee grown, Nashville grown potatoes. The farmers themselves put so much love and pride into this that we hope you can taste it on the plate.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I can see how it's a little bit of a logistical challenge in some cases, but really worth it. I wanted to shift gears and ask you a question about whether there was one moment or experience that really changed the way that you think about food waste.
We run a program called Certified Sustainable Gatherings, and this was an initiative we really launched in 2024 with One Hotels. And the idea behind it was being able to run a larger event scale program, but with sustainability at the forefront, from food to table settings to how we prepare stations to what utensils we use to the plateware, every little detail that comes from launching an event. And we were able to reach a 99.8% diversion rate on our first event. But the bandwidth that it took upon our whole team really allowed the team to think about food waste and sustainability in a way that was much more aggressive than just talking casually about what food waste may be. And, oh, I recycle on Mondays. It was more calling our vendors, hey, I can't take a product that's in plastic. It needs to be, loose in a reusable tote, and we'll figure it out. Or bringing in larger sections of an animal to break down, we'll see what we can break down, what we can reuse on property. And we tracked so much data in this that we've been able to do a few certified sustainable gatherings in the 99% range. And some data just from our Copia program. Last year, we donated 14,000 pounds of food to the community, which is right around 11,800 meals. And that just comes from the experience of these CSG events and knowing kind of what little detail or move we can make when it comes to doing an event that allows us to fulfill our sustainability goals for our company, but also sustain the community.
Wow, that's just incredible. And it must feel so good to have a almost waste-free event and to be able to give your surplus food to so many people. Well, Tyler, this has been really interesting conversation and inspirational. I wanted to ask what advice you might have for other chefs who want to adopt food waste reduction measures, and particularly maybe also for some smaller, medium-sized restaurants. Are there any significant lessons learned or anything else you'd like to share in terms of best practices?
I think the biggest aspect to sustainability, regardless of the size of the operation, is really just culture. And that really comes down to adopting these sustainability practices, but also showcasing them every day in your normal routine to your team and really diving deep, whether that's reinforcing, don't throw this piece of cardboard or plastic in this garbage can, and reaching in with your own hands, grabbing it out and putting it in the right area that needs to be recycled in. So it really drives home that it is a large part of what you want to push forward. And to me, if there was a restaurant that really wanted to dive headfirst in Nashville or anywhere else, look into what sustainability programs or chapters might be in the city, local city government or state government, Metro Nashville has been a large sustainability driver in the city. And I think that's what's been able to put a larger focus for sustainability in the city overall. So being able to partner with people like Urban Green Lab, Copia, Foodprint Group, Compost Nashville, the glass recycling. There's so many programs I think not a lot of people know about, and finding a local chapter such as Urban Green Lab that can kind of push you towards these other resources to really start with and connect with. And I think if everyone's able to find either a chef or a resource in that aspect to just chat with, most chefs who are already practicing sustainability want to talk about it. They want to be able to share this kind of information out in the community.
Thank you for those insights. And obviously, we too are huge fans of Urban Green Lab and several of the groups that you mentioned in Nashville. And that's great advice. I think a lot of people can relate to that, regardless of what area they work in. That team building and feeling like you have a joint mission is very powerful. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being with us today.
It was great to be here. Thank you guys so much for allowing me to really talk about sustainability as it relates to the industry that we're in.
That was wonderful, Tyler. And now for our last segment, sustainability in sports.
Well, we are delighted to have Haley Davidson, the Chief of Staff for the Tennessee Titans professional football team here in Nashville, with us today. Haley oversees many facets of the Titans organization, including leading the Titans strategic operations and communications teams and playing a key role in the development for the new Nissan Stadium. Previously, Haley was the chief operating officer for Nashville-based consulting firm Calvert Street Group, and she also was previously an aide for U.S. Representative Jim Cooper. So I heard a really impressive presentation Haley did a couple of months ago to the mayor's Sustainability Advisory Committee here in Nashville, in which she talked about the sustainability measures that the Titans are adopting, including efforts to reduce food waste. So Haley, I'm delighted you could be with us today.
Thanks so much, Linda. I'm so excited to join you today.
And I want to note that Haley is making a special effort to be with us today because we have had some pretty awful weather here in Nashville and in the Southeast generally these last few days, including tornadoes and flooding. So Haley only has a few minutes, but we are so glad that you're here. And I just want to start by asking you to tell us a little bit about what the Titans are doing to address food waste and maybe why now.
Yes, absolutely. We have started a journey over the past year of learning how we can be a really good partner in the food service industry. We have done a lot of evaluating what we currently do. We operate Nissan Stadium here in Nashville. Every year we have up to 1 million guests come through our doors at the stadium, which is so exciting to have so many people who want to come and watch the Tennessee Titans play, who may also come for a concert, and then also people who come for special events and meetings at the stadium. We're going through right now, as you may have heard, the process to build a new stadium along the East Bank. And through that design and construction process, one of our big goals was to do the best we can with the resources that we have available. So obviously, building a new stadium is a big task, which has been such a fun, exciting experience for all of our colleagues to get to have a hand in this. But our leadership and our organization challenged us to think outside the box. So when we think about one of those goals, we really wanted to set a really high standard, and something that is really important to the city of Nashville was LEED certification. So we're going through the process. We had to design a building that would meet LEED Gold standards, and we're really excited to see how the design team brought that to life. One key element was our waste strategy. And so we've worked really hard on imagining what the future is going to be like in 2027 when the new building opens, and really focus now on what can we be doing right now to bring best practices to our current facility so that when we open our doors in 27, we're creating the best possible scenario.
Haley, that is so interesting. And I gather some of those efforts involve food waste reduction.
Yes, absolutely. It's a huge part of the puzzle as we think about what the new stadium will look like. Linda, I think I called you on my second week here, starting full time, to ask for you to tell me all of the things that I needed to know and to share all of the best practices. So, a huge thanks to ELI for jumping in and sending us everything that there was to know about food practices, just so that we could really start making sure that we have all the information and can set a good standard.
Well, thank you for saying that, Haley. We are glad that we could be helpful. And I understand you're also already doing some things on food waste reduction, but it sounds like you're going to be scaling that up for the new facility.
Absolutely. So we really wanted to start at what are we doing right now? What we learned is that we were doing a lot of good things, especially in food donations. So our food and beverage vendors were really great. Our concessionaires were great. They were already matching with nonprofits in the community and donating meals that could be donated. One key that we learned is that we weren't really tracking that. So we needed to start with the basics. What are we doing? Where is it going? And making sure that we are keeping good track of that now in the current stadium. And then where are opportunities where maybe we can change some practices and maybe change some of the way we operate to either have less food waste or to have more food waste that we could donate. So that was the first step. The second step was we have a lot of trash that goes out of our stadium. And so we worked with our waste partner, WM Advisory Services, on imagining what we could be doing better. And they came up with some really great ideas. And one thing that they really highlighted was the opportunity in the new stadium to eventually be zero waste and how important composting would be because so much of our waste is food waste. So we were able to start a pilot thanks to their help with our local composting partner, the compost company. And we started small. We started really, really small. And then we have an amazing operations team at our stadium that every game, every event has just worked to really improve what we were doing. So starting back of house, moving into some of the club spaces, and now also translating that to some of our events that we host that are not our major events like concerts and football games, but also groups that are coming in and hosting meetings at the stadium and making sure that we're gathering all the waste we can get.
That just makes so much sense. And I assume it's something you would recommend to other professional sports teams or large venues, which is start small, pilot it and see what works and see where the barriers are so that you can ramp up more successfully.
Exactly. In our first year, we were able to capture 30,000 pounds that went to the compost company, and we had 4,000 meals that were donated. Just yesterday, we had to cancel an event due to the weather, and our food concessionaire immediately had a plan for where the food was going to go and where it was going to get donated so that there was really no waste at all from that event.
Wow, that's really impressive. And you think about it, that would have just all been thrown away a few years ago.
Exactly. Our concessionaires have always thought about how to have as little waste as possible and also try to meet the needs in the community. When your concert's at 11 o'clock, there are only a few organizations that can take food and meals that are prepared, and they have just done a really great job at making those connections and then quickly pivoting to how do we get the food, how do we get the meals to people in need.
Right. It really is a logistical challenge more than anything else. It's finding someone who can take it, having the transportation, having the storage, being able to keep it at an appropriate temperature. But it sounds like you're doing a great job. So, Haley, I'm
Curious if, in addition to your efforts to reduce what we call back of house waste, including food waste from the kitchens that prepare food, you also plan to work with Titan's fans on reducing their plate waste.
We're working right now with WM Advisory Services on how that will be fan facing and how we will bring the waste experience and the composting experience directly to the fans. A lot of it really factors on important decisions that you make before a single fan walks in to a game. So it's the materials that we're bringing in, our streams, how it can be sorted. In the new facility, we have really big resource recovery room where the waste can be sorted and go to the places where it needs to go. Right now, we don't have a resource recovery room. So we don't have a place where you can sort the waste. And we're really excited about the facility in the future and being able to sort the waste.
Well, that sounds great. When is the first season the Titans are going to play in the new stadium?
2027. And we can't wait. We're really excited.
Well, Haley, thank you again for being with us today. And with that, we are wrapping up discussions with some of Nashville's leaders on food waste reduction. A thank you to Todd Lawrence with UGL, David Kyle at Vanderbilt, Tyler Lee at One Hotel, and again, Haley Davidson with the Titans. It has been wonderful to highlight the work you all are doing in a range of sectors, from nonprofits to universities to hospitality to professional sports. But I can honestly say we could do several more podcasts like this, because there are now so many people thinking creatively and working hard to reduce food waste in Nashville. And Dara, I'm going to hand it back to you to wrap this up, with special thanks to you for organizing this podcast.
Listeners, thanks for coming along and diving into the world of Nashville's food waste reduction efforts to learn from different changemakers about strategies to prevent food waste and motivations for doing so. No matter what industry you work in, we all have something to learn from one another. And that wraps up another episode of People, Places, Planet. See you in the next one.
Thanks for listening to People, Places, Planet, the official podcast of the Environmental Law Institute. Our work wouldn't be possible without the support of people like you. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, attend one of our events, or support our work financially, head to eli.org.